Next up on our list is Bryce Miller. Bryce Miller making 25 starts for the Mariners. I don't think that's something that they anticipated. It's certainly not something I anticipated, but there was a lot of good. There was a lot of mediocre, and there was a good handful of just bad too. And the good news is there's stats that back up the good. The bad news is, well, we'll get into the bad news in a bit. But let's thank the good people of Simply Seattle first for providing the very best in Seattle sports gear. Great stuff for your Mariners, of course, but also the Seahawks, the Kraken, the Storm, the Sounders, the Huskies, the Cougars. You can find it all at Simply Seattle. And once you find everything that you want to purchase, and you're going to find a lot of stuff that you want to purchase, use promo code MollyWAP15 to take 15% off your order. Just type it in at checkout. Link in the description, MOLLYWHOP15 and simplyseattle.com. So let's go back to the start of the year because Bryce Miller, I think, had established himself as one of the best pitching prospects in the system in 2022. But by the time spring training was over, like watching him pitch, it was abundantly clear that he was the best pitching prospect on the team. All due respect to Brian Wu, all due respect to Emerson Hancock and some other guys, it was Bryce Miller. Bryce Miller was the guy. And it was pretty clear to me that if they needed a long-term answer early on or late on or whenever on, they were going to go to Bryce Miller. I just didn't expect it to be as early as it was. And the early portion of Bryce Miller, especially, I mean, I don't think you could overstate how impressive that was. Those first three starts he makes, yes, one against Oakland, but, you know, it is what it is. And the eye test mattered. He was dominant. And there was a lot of, at least in terms of run prevention, a lot of dominant from Bryce Miller. In 13 of his 25 starts, Bryce Miller, it's funny, I can't say his last name after I called him Bryson all year. Bryce Miller allowed no more than one run in 13 of his 25 starts. So that's 52% of the starts that he made where he did not allow more than a single run. And in 6 of them, shutout baseball. That's really impressive. I mean, you can say what you want about lineup quality. You can say what you want about some good fortune. A rookie pitcher in over half of his starts did not give up more than a run. I don't know how you can say anything but congratulations on that. That's really impressive. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, a quarter of his starts, he allowed at least 5 runs. And that's not good. That's not something that you can have from a mid-rotation starter. It's certainly not something you could have from a top-of-the-rotation guy. And I think some of this is he did tire. But I think some of this also was some ascension to the mean. Definitely had some ascension to the mean because there was a lot of good luck for a guy who doesn't miss a lot of bats. Now, one thing that really helps is when you have as much spin on your fastball as Bryce Miller did. And Bryce Miller ranked in the 99th percentile in spin rate as a rookie. That's really impressive too. That's really impressive. And I think the thing that impressed me the most was it's impressive, and it's also, I think, something that he's going to have to work on, which is a weird thing to say. The ability to throw strikes was amazing. He ranked in the 95th percentile in walk rate. 4.8% of the hitters he faced, he walked. That's outstanding. And not giving you that self-inflicted damage in terms of walks anyway, I think was huge. I think that's one of the reasons why you saw so many starts where he was super efficient, got through 5 or 6 innings, won 7-inning start of shutout baseball against Detroit. And when you don't put those guys on, this is obvious point is obvious for most. It gives you a really good chance for success. Beyond a good chance, it gives you a great chance for success. Those numbers are impressive. Just the spin he gets on his four-seam fastball is just, I could talk about it for 20 minutes, and I might. The concerns here are what he's going to do about the secondary pitches, because look, I am an eye test guy. Those of you who have followed me for a while, one, sorry, I tried to get better. I didn't. And number two, I rely on my eye test. I have covered prospects for a long time. I believe, not everybody agrees, that I have a pretty good scouting eye. I don't see very many on the 20/80 scale, which you can just go Google. I don't see any above average secondary pitches. I see some solid average ones, but I don't see that second swing and miss pitch. There were some flashes with his slider, but not enough. Not enough. And you're going to have to, even with the spinniest of fastballs, you're going to have more than that to be anything more than a back end starter. And we'll take the lazy route and look at Savant. He ranked in the bottom 10th percentile in average exit velocity and barrel percentage. He only generated ground balls 34.5% of the time. Expected batting average of 270 would have ranked in the 17th percentile. That it wouldn't rank it. It did. Chase rate of only 46%. Whiff percentage and K percentage, both below average. 24.1, 36 percentile, 40% for the K rate, 40% in the ranking. 40% K would be very nice. 22.2% of the hitters he faced, he struck out. And it just as simple as this. You have to give hitters a reason to come off your fastball. It can have all the spin in the world, and it has good velocity. I think it was something around 96 most of the year. 95 is what Savant tells me. But you can't just rely on your fastball. And I think, to steal from a really good podcast, I think Bryce Miller is going to have to work on being a little more effectively wild. Because it's great that he trusts his stuff. Maybe he shouldn't trust it as much as he does. Something in the secondaries is going to have to make a market improvement. And my guess is it's going to be the slider. It's going to have to be, based on just the fact that he didn't throw his changeup and curve enough to even suggest that it's remotely ready. Sure, maybe he goes to something like Driveline or something along those lines and works really hard at developing a splinker. But he only threw his secondary pitches 34% of the time, and 27% of those was the slider. And it's just okay. It's just okay. And I think the other thing that really backs this up is we got to talk about what he did against right-handers versus left-handers. This is more shocking than the Brian Wu ERA versus teams that were good versus teams that were bad. So 282 plate appearance against right-handers and 255 against lefties. That's a pretty darn even split. Right-handers in those 282 plate appearances hit 200 with a 234 OBP and a 315 slugging percentage. 549 OPS. Whew, that's really good. That's outstanding for a reliever, for a starter, oh my goodness gracious, that's impressive. It's clear that right-handers struggle to pick up the baseball, and because of the amount of backspin that he's generating on that fastball, even if you do pick it up, pretty darn hard to hit it hard. Allowed 6 homers in 282 plate appearances versus right-handers. A 315 slugging percentage for a guy who relies so much on his fastball. That's outstanding. But against lefties, those 255 plate appearances I aforementioned, 303, 358, 558. That is an OPS of 917. That's Hall of Fame level. You're in the conversation. If you're a good defensive player, you're in. 12 homers allowed against left-handers in those 255 plate appearances. That's bad. That's really bad. And that's my biggest concern. How much can he improve in that regard without making marked improvement with his secondary pitches? And the slider's not going to do it. Like, it's great if you can get that thing on the back feet of left-handers. That's great. It's going to have to be a change or a curve, something off speed that gets them out in front. Because to say they weren't out in front against him is the understatement of understatements. They clobbered him. That you can't overstate it. That's the concern. And left-handed hitters are going to be in the lineup against Bryce Miller a lot. Teams know this. Teams absolutely know that this guy had an OPS difference of about 340 points, give or take, versus right-handers and versus left-handers. Just some other stats here. He was much better at home than away, which not a huge surprise. 679 OPS in his 14 home starts, 771 away, 5.18 ERA on the road, 3.65 at home. First half of the year, 601 OPS, very good. Second half, 811 OPS, very bad. And much of that, I mean, there's an improvement on base percentage from 251 to 325. That's not insignificant. But his slugging percentage went from 350 in the first half to 486 in the second. 3.97 ERA in the first half, second half, 4.60. But honestly, I think that's a little well, it is and it isn't. Bryce Miller was good in August. Bryce Miller was actually very good in August. A 3.86 ERA, 29-6 strikeout to walk ratio. Maybe very good was a little hyperbolic, but that'll play. He was awful in September. 6.08 ERA. Hitters hit 333, 391, 563, 953. That is the Hall of Fame. Assuming you didn't, you're in the Hall of Fame with 953. So it seems like I'm super negative here on Bryce Miller. And I'm not trying to be. These are just the numbers that are in front of me. And the eye test tells me that hitters figured some stuff out. But I saw more than enough flashes of brilliance here. And I'm saying brilliance to suggest that this guy has a very bright future. If this version of him can work, A little bit. The numbers against the lefties have to be kept to a low roar or a dull roar, however you're supposed to say that. I think it's both. That has to be kept to a minimum. But the version that we saw in 2023, if that's all Bryce Miller is, that's a darn good fourth or fifth starter. But it's also why if somebody is calling the Seattle Mariners and they are just trying to flip them some bats, and Bryce Miller is the guy they're really asking for, I'm certainly not giving him away, but he'd be the guy that I'd be the most willing to give up. Cost control and all that stuff, there are just enough inherent flaws that I would probably move him over Brian Wu. Now, either one, if I can go get a legitimate middle of the order bat, whichever one they prefer, go do it. Go do it and go sign another starting pitcher. But I don't know what to say to end this, to be honest. I saw so much good from him. But taking a closer look at those numbers and looking at the Savant page and watching some starts back, believe it or not, I do some research. Also said do. There's a lot of reason to be concerned too. So I ask you, Bryce Miller, how confident are you in him taking that next step? Are you cautiously optimistic? Are you cautiously pessimistic? Are you all on board? Are you panicking? Shouldn't panic. I'll just tell you that right now. As bad as some of those numbers I gave you, you should not panic. But yeah, I'm very curious. And while you're coming up with your conclusion, if you could hit like on this video and subscribe and share it with your friends, oh, I'd appreciate it so much. I would appreciate it so very, very much. Really appreciate the support. We'll talk again soon. I have no idea who's next. I imagine it's Matt Brash or Justin Topa. I don't know who ended up higher on the war leader. But yeah, a lot of good from Bryce Miller. Definitely some reasons for concern too.